The Ark of the Covenant sits in a strange space, between history and something much harder to define. It is mentioned clearly enough in ancient sources to suggest it was real, described in enough detail to feel physical, yet it disappears so completely from the record that everything after a certain point becomes silence. That silence is exactly where the mystery grows. The earliest descriptions place the Ark in a very specific moment of human history, during the years after the Israelites left Egypt and moved through the desert. According to the narrative, it was not a symbolic object created centuries later, but something built in real time. During a period of constant movement, survival, and uncertainty, the instructions for its construction are unusually precise. Acacia wood, gold overlay, exact measurements, rings placed on the sides, poles for carrying it so that human hands would never touch its surface directly. Even in the way it is described, it already feels different from ordinary religious artifacts of the ancient world. What makes it stand out is not just its appearance, but the role it was said to play. The Ark was not treated as decoration or storage. It was considered a physical meeting point between the divine and the human world. In the stories, when the Ark was present, something shifted in the environment around it. Decisions were made through it. Battles were influenced by it, and entire communities organized their movement around where it was carried. One of the more striking episodes is the account of Jericho. The Ark is carried around the city, not as a weapon in the usual sense, but as part of a ritual procession. The walls of the city eventually collapse. Whether someone reads that as a literal historical event or as a symbolic story about faith and psychological warfare, the Ark sits at the center of it. It is not just present in the story. It is the trigger around which the story moves. Inside the religious tradition, the Ark eventually becomes even more restricted. It is placed within sacred spaces that only certain people can enter, and even then only under strict conditions. The idea develops that direct contact with it is dangerous. There are passages that describe fatal consequences for those who approach it incorrectly. Whether this reflects an actual belief in physical danger or a way of expressing extreme sacredness, the effect is the same. The Ark becomes untouchable. When Solomon's temple is built in Jerusalem, the Ark is said to be placed in its innermost chamber, the Holy of Holies. This location is not just hidden. It is conceptually separated from the rest of the world. Most people would never see it. Even priests would only enter at specific times under strict ritual preparation. At this stage, the Ark is no longer part of everyday religious life. It becomes something distant, almost unreachable, even within its own system of worship. Then history reaches a breakpoint. In 586 BCE, the Babylonian forces capture Jerusalem. The first temple is destroyed. After this moment, the Ark is no longer clearly mentioned in surviving records. It does not appear in inventories of captured treasures. It is not described as destroyed. It simply stops appearing. That absence is where centuries of speculation begin. One of the most common ideas is that the Ark was hidden before the destruction of the temple. According to some interpretations, priests may have moved it into secret underground chambers beneath the city. Jerusalem, with its layers of construction over thousands of years, makes this idea feel at least physically possible. But no confirmed archaeological discovery has ever supported it. Another tradition suggests it was taken to Babylon as war spoils. This would fit with how ancient conquerors often documented what they carried away from defeated cities. Yet again, there is no clear Babylonian record describing such an object. Then there are more distant claims, far outside the mainstream historical consensus, that the Ark traveled beyond the region entirely. One of the most persistent comes from Ethiopia, where certain religious traditions in Axum claim to safeguard the original Ark within the Church of St. Mary of Zion. According to this belief, it was moved there centuries ago and has remained protected ever since, guarded by a single monk chosen for life. The object itself is never publicly shown, which only deepens both belief and skepticism around the claim. What is interesting is that none of these theories fully erase the Ark from history. Instead, they multiply its possible locations. It becomes an object that might be underground in Jerusalem, lost in ancient Mesopotamia, or preserved somewhere in East Africa. The lack of evidence does not close the story. It expands it. At the same time, there is another way the Ark is often understood, especially among historians who approach it from a non-theological perspective. In this view, the Ark may have functioned less as a literal powered object and more as a highly sacred container representing law, identity, and unity for a nomadic people. The strict rules surrounding it, who could touch it, when it could be carried, where it could be placed, can be seen as a way of preserving authority and structure in a fragile social system. Objects like this were not uncommon in ancient cultures. Many societies created physical items believed to carry divine presence. What makes the Ark unusual is the intensity of its descriptions and the way it disappears so completely later on. Most sacred objects leave traces, replicas, references, later versions. The Ark does not follow that pattern clearly. This gap is part of why it continues to attract modern attention. In popular culture, it often becomes something more than a religious artifact. It is imagined as a source of overwhelming power, something that cannot be safely controlled. Films, novels, and documentaries tend to emphasize this angle, turning it into an object that belongs somewhere between archaeology and science fiction. But that interpretation, while dramatic, is only one layer of its long history of meanings. There is also a quieter aspect to the Ark story that often gets overlooked. Regardless of whether it existed exactly as described, it reflects how ancient people understood the idea of presence, how something invisible could be made physically meaningful. The Ark is not just about what was inside it, but about what it represented outside of it. Law, memory, identity, and the attempt to hold all of those things in one physical form. As time moves further away from the events described in these texts, the Ark becomes less of a historical object and more of a question that keeps reopening itself. Each generation returns to it with different expectations. Some look for archaeological evidence. Some look for spiritual meaning. Others are simply drawn to the mystery of something that was once central and then completely lost. And even now, the question remains open in a very simple way. If the Ark truly existed in the form described, what happened to it after it disappeared from the record? The absence of an answer is not just a gap in history. It is the reason the story continues to survive. Because in the end, the Ark is not only about where it went, it is also about why we still keep looking for it.